Salome, Salome, princess, princess, princess. Salome, princess of Judea. Salome is a character who has been transformed through adaptation. She began her days as part of Christian canon in the Gospel, known only as the girl or Herodias' daughter in Mark and Matthew. Herodias was married to the brother of King Herod of Galilee, before Herod decided it was Herodias that he wanted. They both divorced their spouses to marry each other. The two were condemned by the followers of Christ for this quote-unquote incestuous marriage, particularly John the Baptist. Salome, Herodias' daughter from her first marriage, was used as a tool for Herodias to have John the Baptist killed. On his birthday, Herod gave a banquet for his high officials and military commanders and the leading men of Galilee. When the daughter of Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his dinner guests. The king said to the girl, "Ask me for anything you want and I'll give it to you." And he promised her with an oath, "Whatever you ask, I will give you, up to half my kingdom." She went out and said to her mother, "What shall I ask for?" "The head of John the Baptist," she answered. In his writings, Josephus, everyone's favourite historian for early Christianity, gave Salome her name. Her legacy is vast for such a small player in the Bible's events. She is seen as a seductress, her dancing giving her dangerous sexuality. Dancing was seen as very evocative and sexual in Christianity, so her temptress quality is distinctly remembered and condemned. She is used as a cautionary tale for young women, warning them against expressing their sexuality so as not to corrupt men. Salome was a true femme fatale of her day. The treatment of Salome in history has been driven by misogyny, demonizing her for her sexuality. Her actions were not even of her own motivation. It was her mother's wish she was fulfilling, and according to Matthew, King Herod even wanted John the Baptist dead before Salome's request for his head. He was just too afraid to do it. She was vilified for centuries for her role in the death of John the Baptist, and mainly because of the sexual connotations of her dance, when according to the very text which brought her into Christian canon, she was merely a pawn in her mother's and Herod's schemes. That was, however, until Oscar Wilde, gay Irish icon and legendary playwright, got his hands on her. Wilde took inspiration from Salome's story, from the Bible, from art and from legend, and transformed her. The most critical change he made was to give Salome agency. He did this by tweaking the story in a number of ways. First, Salome only dances for Herod after he promises her anything she wants up to half his kingdom. By doing this, Wilde makes Salome the driver of the story. Without her, there is no story in the play. In the Bible, Herod only promises her anything she wants after she dances. Second, in Wilde's version, Salome deeply desires John the Baptist, or Yochanan as he is referred to in the play. She adores his physical appearance, notably his whiter-than-white skin, his dark hair which resembles clusters of black grapes, and his crimson-red lips. This gives Salome a twisted motive for requesting his head, so she can fulfill her desire of kissing his lips, even in death. She outright rejects the idea that she is doing her mother's bidding by demanding the head of Yochanan. Salome says, "I do not heed my mother. It is for mine own pleasure that I ask the head of Yochanan in a silver charger. You have sworn, Herod. Forget not that you have sworn an oath." Third, it is made clear throughout the play that Herod lusts after Salome, and that these advances are not welcome either by Salome herself or by her mother Herodias. Salome is very resistant when Herod begs her to dance for him. She only agrees when she realizes the power that comes from her sexuality, that if she dances for Herod, he will grant her anything she wants. She is empowered by her sexuality. Lastly, Herod tries with all his might to refuse Salome's wish. He offers her everything he can think of in exchange, but Salome fiercely stands her ground, not allowing herself to be bullied or made to submit. She knows what she wants and she gets it. These alterations make Salome a powerful and grotesquely admirable figure, rather than a powerless pawn. The focus of the play is Salome's desire, not Herodias' revenge. Wilde's play is also the first time the dance she performs is given the name The Dance of the Seven Veils. Salome is killed by Herod's men by the end of the play, not as punishment for her powerful sexuality, but rather for her horrifying fondling and kissing of Yochanan's disembodied head. Wilde's Salome has little to do with honouring the morals of Christianity. It leans into the evil within the protagonists without showing John the Baptist to be particularly morally superior. The play can be seen as queer because it was penned by a queer person. Salome has inspired queer people through her irreverence and her subversive power. And there are suggestions of queer love between two of the characters, the page of Herodias and the young Syrian. They are very close, and when the young Syrian kills himself, the page of Herodias despairs, reminiscing on the intimate times the two men shared. The story of Salome has been adapted in many mediums, from painting to opera, from dance to the meta concept of a play within a film being performed to an actor playing Oscar Wilde. It is a highly intoxicating story, attracting all sorts of audiences. Al Pacino became intensely obsessed with it for a while, producing a play, a film, and a documentary about the play and film all at once. The first few film adaptations were silent, with one in 1918 directed by J. Gordon Edwards and starring Theda Bara as Salome, and J. Redmond Nye as Herod, and one in 1923 directed by Charles Bryant and starring Alla Nazimova, bisexual queen, as Salome, and Mitchell Lewis as Herod. For me, Wilde's plays should never be adapted without full access to his charismatic words. His mastery of the patterns and rhythms of language is what makes his plays so distinctive. His plots are secondary to his words. In fact, one could argue that the plot is made up of the language he uses, the repeated motifs, the unusual expressions, and the running jokes. Silent films can only do so much to relay the language of the piece, and they simply don't do this rhythmic play justice. That being said, the 1923 film adaptation starring Nazimova does capture the queerness and the horror of Salome better than most. Along with the rumoured all-gay cast, the stunning visuals, and a brilliant performance from Nazimova, this adaptation would be my favourite if not for the lamentable loss of Wilde's musical words. The 1953 version, starring Rita Hayworth as Salome and Charles Laughton as Herod, suffers dreadfully from the motion picture production code morality rules which were in place in Hollywood at the time. Herod is portrayed as a relatively good man with questionable motives rather than a terrible king who perversely lusts after his own stepchild. Salome is presented as a beautiful, serene princess, denied of the agency afforded to her other representations and reduced to a puppet in her evil mother's schemes. Herodias is the one who actually asks for the head of John the Baptist in this adaptation, while Hayworth's Salome is relieved of any immoral action so the film can get past the censors. Salome is stripped of character, just a beautiful thing to look at while other people push the action forward. The relationship between Herod and Salome is played as a harmless, unrequited interest rather than the highest form of creepery it truly is. There is no horror, no queerness, no spirit of rebellion in this adaptation. It's actually reframed as a romance story between Salome and some dude. The script is a fairly sacrilegious departure from Wilde's beautiful dialogue, if I do say so myself. In fact, it seems that the filmmakers almost completely disregarded the play, draining this adaptation of any hope of vitality as an adaptation of Wilde's Salome. Beyond the names and relationships, it doesn't try to truthfully honour any source material whatsoever, not even the Bible. I also take issue with pronouncing it like salami, but that's really neither here nor there. A few films feature Salome as a play within the film, like Sunset Boulevard in 1950, where Gloria Swanson's character, Norma Desmond, is trying to sell her screen adaptation of Salome, all the while her own grasp on reality becomes more and more feeble. The play is also featured in Cookie's Fortune in 1999, with Glenn Close playing the director and Julianne Moore rehearsing as the lead role. One of Pedro Almodovar's first short films was a little story inspired by Salome, although this has little to do with Wilde's play. There's also a psychedelic retelling of Salome, which has some very experimental imagery sliced together in a very intense way, but this version heavily sexualizes Salome and also all women to the point of dehumanizing her. If you're interested in this sort of avant-garde Italian take on Salome with highly saturated, fast-paced imagery and a lot of objectification of women's bodies, then the 1972 Carmelo Bene film is the adaptation for you. Of all the adaptations I've seen, Al Pacino's obsessive trinity of adaptations of Salome was actually one of the most seductive and exciting. It shows a deep understanding of the text and a fierce devotion to honouring Wilde and his remarkable prose. In retrospect, Pacino's selection of Jessica Chastain to play Salome early in her career gives the production a feminist edge. In this version, it is understood that the titular character's arc is one of learning her own power, even if this power is of a horrific nature. Chastain is now known for taking feminist roles and for her advocacy for women's issues, so her reputation retroactively brings a certain weight to the production, immediately letting today's audience know what kind of adaptation this is. The film is set up unusually. It's almost like a recorded play. The actors deliver lines verbatim in the style of stage acting more so than screen acting, but the production has some of the extra trimmings of cinema. It's filmed on a set rather than a stage, using a variety of angles to make the action more dynamic, and we get to see the moon in its pale red and black state, which adds to the mood and highlights the importance of the words the characters use. The moon is a recurring motif in the play, with many characters using it to draw parallels with Salome's state of mind. We also get to see Yochanan in his cistern underground, below everyone else, which might give us an idea about how the rest of the characters view him in this adaptation, not as much more than an inconvenience, which might cause them great trouble. It gives the play a point of view, placing more emphasis on the characters at hand than the off-screen religious developments. The characters themselves don't seem to think much of religion at all, considering it as more of a political issue than anything else. Pacino plays Herod with his creepy, inappropriate ogling, and Chastain plays Salome beautifully in all her deranged, empowered monstrosity. One issue with this adaptation, however, is that during Salome's Dance of the Seven Veils, Chastain is seen topless. Pacino justifies this creative choice by pointing out that virtually every depiction of Salome in art shows her as nude, but it comes across as gratuitous. The nudity isn't necessary because the audience is in no doubt about the sexual implications of the dance. While Pacino's film adaptation of Wilde's play remains my personal favourite, its bare-bones approach does feel lacking at times. I would love to see a more cinematic version of Salome, with the energy of Pacino's version, but the scope of the 2002 film The Importance of Being Earnest, for example, another one of Wilde's plays, which was adapted for the big screen to much success, without compromising the integrity of the source text. Salome is an icon, and she deserves to be portrayed in all her grotesque glory.